Hello, and welcome to another episode of Treasury Talks, where we're talking with lots of different individuals, particularly about different areas of finance and how it affects our lives today and into the future. With me today, I want to thank our Lieutenant Governor, Bethany Hall Long. Her dedication to the state has been immense. And I would love to just sort of start by having you briefly share your background and how you got the opportunity to serve.
Thank you, Treasurer Davis. It is so incredibly important that you host these events to share updates in our state. And thank you for your leadership. And I hope in a moment we can talk about some of the activities you and I do in our hats, in our health field hat. For me, it was actually my work as a public health nurse and a professor of nursing and health policy that really got me engaged and interested in being part of a solution to individuals' health. And so I ran and in Delaware became a state rep, later a state senator. After 16 years in the legislature, was thrilled in 2016 to become the lieutenant governor. And so coming to being able to advocate not only for vulnerable groups like veterans and those who are homeless, but also indicating along other pillars like finance that are really important, issues of environment and education. And it's just been an exciting time to be in public office. Now, this past year has not been just exciting. It has been one that has been challenging. And I think we'll have a chance to talk about that. I know you have worked really hard as our treasurer to help us with our state finances and help Delawareans to understand during these tough times what to do with their finances. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much for covering some of that. Really and truly, I think that your background has lent to this current situation very well. I'd love to talk about some of your extensive and really tireless work as it pertains to COVID. You have been one of the most active lieutenant governors in the country with respect to considering some of the things that we are focused on in the near term, the impacts on mental health, substance abuse, vaccination efforts, impact on state employees. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that, your background has shaped your position and some of that tireless work that you've been up to?
It's ironic that you mentioned our unique roles, both of us, you as a physician's assistant, myself as a doctorally prepared professor in nursing and public health, that we probably are two of the statewide electeds in this country who have been out at all hours in all types of weather and conditions during the COVID pandemic because of our health hat. I think I know it helps us as we draft policy. I know sharing with our Secretary Bullock, Governor Carney had me co-chair the pandemic resurgence. And you were so participatory too, working up and down the state with our business community that was greatly impacted. But we all said to have that healthy economy, we have to have a healthy community. So like yourself, we rolled up our sleeves and have been out COVID testing, whether I was under a bridge with homeless here, I'm in Wilmington today under I-95, or whether I was down working with poultry workers and outreach persons in Western or Eastern Sussex. It was about getting persons testing, right? And getting them the appropriate shelter that they needed, getting them in housing, teaching them about quarantine and isolation. And then ultimately, as we've worked through these periods of time, not only have we had to work with the individual, the faith leaders, our Latino leaders, Black leaders, persons in our community, but we've had to really sit down and work with our business community. And I know for Governor Carney and his team and you as our state treasurer, it's really been one at which, again, we want that healthy community, then we'll be able to have the healthy economy. And so during testing, during hand washing and masking, and all of these efforts, we've now, as you and I've had the pleasure to do together, have gone into the vaccination period, which is so important. A lot of myths and some challenges. We will get more vaccine. So to summarize your question, we have spent a lot of time, I think you and I, in the trenches, trying to get our community healthy so that we can have that healthy economy.
One of the things that I find really remarkable about what we're in the midst of, right, with this pandemic, is it really is sort of all encompassing. And one of the things that I think you've done so well is really relied on some of the community leaders, as you said, our church leaders, our community advocates, our healthcare partners, and in a variety of different ways, you've created this expansive touch point that really helps to enliven everyone to take part. And I think we all feel as though, well, hey, I'm part of this huge team that is Delaware, and truly sort of, I think underscores the concept of the Delaware way. And, one of the things that I think stands out to me is also your Lieutenant Governor Challenge and the healthy lifestyles. Can you talk a little bit about what the goals are there, and what you're looking to achieve from that perspective?
During these periods of isolation and during these times, we've had a lot of persons, not only with the physical challenges of COVID, but the emotional and the well-being. And so part of the Lieutenant Governor's Challenge 2.0, building on what Governor Carney had years ago when he was Lieutenant Governor, was we broadened not only physical health, whether it be cardiovascular disease, diabetes interventions, cancer screening and prevention, but also looking at that whole person, the mind-body connection, emotional well-being from cradle till grave. Our school children, prenatal education, to our elders who maybe unfortunately are also linking into some behavioral health challenges of Alzheimer's or early dementia. And so how we've done that, Treasurer Davis, is that linking in how importantly cost effective it is to have these health offerings. You and I both know that state employees often, particularly during COVID, had to shift very quickly how they work. And like all employees, even in the public sector, suddenly they're at home, they're teaching children, they're managing, or for many, they were laid off and unemployed. So how do we do coping? How do we do stress management? So I would encourage folks to check out the Lieutenant Governor's Challenge 2.0, where we have tools both for the individual, but mostly for the health system. So a system meaning where you go to worship or pray, your church or your synagogue or your mosque, or where your children perhaps are in school. Or most importantly, we spend a lot of time with employers such as state agencies, but also the private sector, and looking at things that we can actually manage. So again, coping and stress. During this time, anxiety has gone up, depression's gone up, or also during this time, let's face it, you've heard people talk about the COVID-15, like gaining weight, talking about what we can do. We've seen tremendous systems outcomes. A lot of work still to do. We're not perfect, but thanks to you and others who are in this lane sharing the word, hopefully we can get a little better. So a lot of information there.
I love how you're sort of tying back the Lieutenant Governor's 2.0 challenge, right? Healthy lifestyles and setting goals and prioritizing our health with our pocketbooks. And I think that it's empowering to sort of go, okay, one, I'm not alone. Two, I've got the ability to set those goals and prioritize and take care of myself and make myself a priority in my own life and my own healthcare. And you've really highlighted that, and that's so important for people. I want to transition, in thinking about the role of the vice president and how it sort of is correlative and sort of runs parallel to your role inside state legislature. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
Because I don't think very many people always remember the really outstanding role that you play there.
Thanks. Yeah, I know the lieutenant governor kind of gets gets a little confusing for some. And as I look across the nation as the chair of the NLGA, you will hear that most of us, like the vice president, like we're watching now with our Vice President Harris, we all watched her having to do tiebreakers now and being present in the United States Senate. I too, one of my constitutional roles, as are many lieutenant governors, we preside over our Senate chambers. And so I get to preside with my incredible colleagues that I served with as a senator now. And again, that's 45 days out of the year, and an important role, again, to be part of the dialogue, to be part of the proceedings. And certainly, if there was a need to break a tie, would be able to do so. So, like Vice President Biden's former role, now President Biden, when he was vice president, having to preside, filling in on those policy areas that whether the president or the governor feels your efforts are important. So I was very pleased when Governor Carney asked me to lead the Behavioral Health Consortium, which is looking at substance use disorder, brain health, behavioral health, cradle to grave. And this past year, something that's really important as we look at redistricting, the census, the Delaware Complete Count Commission. I was thrilled to work on that. Those are just a couple policy areas, in addition to like the pandemic resurgence that I mentioned earlier, where I got to co-chair with Secretary Bullock, looking at issues of equity, health, and business. That I was pleased to help our governor. So like the vice president being there to support the president, I am here to also be supportive not only of our governor, but members of our General Assembly and yourself, others statewide, elected officials, where we can collaborate to really come up with great strategies that affect everyday Delawareans. Just like our vice president, now president, Joe Biden, myself as lieutenant governor, I think it is really about being in the community. It's the final thing I'll say. The role of the lieutenant governor is to really be out face to face. And that's what I have really enjoyed about this job, is the stories and being every day, I think, in all three counties in this state, safely protected now with my mask and my sanitizer and all.
Yeah, and you're doing a great job of that as well.
Thanks. And my PPE, right? My shield, my eye shields. Yeah.
Finally, I just want to again underscore the challenges. The pandemic has posed so many different challenges, and I think so many of us are truly aware of them, because we're all kind of muddling through this together in a variety of ways. We're feeling the isolation at times. We're utilizing technology to try to stay connected. But I'd love for you to just give us a little inside picture of what it's like to run the Senate virtually, and whether that's been easy.
I think my having been a professor for 3 decades has helped, because I have learned to read nonverbal very well. And I think if you're able to read nonverbal on Zoom, it's particularly important. Now, I can't control a nonverbal outburst when the dog barks or the screen goes off, or I cannot, if I had $1 for every time I could say, "You're muted." You need to unmute, right? We'd have a cougher in my kitty, so to say. But it is unique. I think the hardest part is that, we are in a position where I think sometimes we might have dialogue that's possibly missed. But at the same time, I have to say it has yielded itself to some pretty more quick dialogue and to getting to action on votes. So there are pros and cons. But nothing is like being in person. I really look forward to that day. But again, until we in Delaware do a better job, we're working hard. We're at 10% of us being vaccinated. We're just going to have to accept the reality and get vaccinated, do these things. And before you know it, maybe next year at this time, we'll be in person, and that would be great.
Well, I'm certainly looking forward to that. I will just say again, I really appreciate your ability to pivot and take on so much of the technological changes that we required to continue to move forward and have a strong legislative calendar. but more so, I just want to thank you for serving and for being that advocate that I think we've all needed. Um, I really appreciate it, and I thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you. Well, thank you. It's all hands on deck. And I love being the undercover lieutenant governor out there working in the people with my PPE on. It's phenomenal, but it is a team effort, whether it's our General Assembly, our governor's office, you as a statewide elected treasurer. Thank you for looking out for the little person. Thank you for helping people when they're down with their unemployment, when they're having these challenges. So to you, treasurer, I have to say it's a mutual thank you. And to those listening, and, don't hesitate. If you're not feeling okay, that's okay. You can call 211 or our Hope line. No one has to go about this alone. We have resources. So I really hope folks do dial in and continue to work with you. Thank you, Treasurer Davis. It's been a pleasure to join you today.